I suppose let's start off with the factor which they're blaming for the drop in earnings, which is the weather, and of course out of the hands of management at both Williamson and Kapchorua, and of course Kapchorua being an associate of Williamson. So tell us to what extent did weather hurt earnings for the full year?
I think the weather in comparison to previous year was probably relatively positive. So, you know, when we look at the comparison, and their comments are that up to December they had fairly good rainfall. Only the last quarter of the year is when they had a lot of cold, which is affects the tea in terms of frost. But they also had relatively dry weather, which is widely expected because that's normally the dry season in Kenya. So I'm not sure that the weather is such a big factor on this particular earnings.
Okay, so we have earnings which fell back by 3.8%. What was the big factor? Because we're not seeing earnings growing for the period at a time when, of course, we had the shilling low for most of last year. We saw it hit a record low of around 107 last year, October. So what are the key factors which are depressing earnings?
I think when you look at a tea production company, the key factors to look at first, as you mentioned, is the weather, the exchange rate, and the world tea prices. I think when you look at those factors, all of them seem to be positive for them during that particular. We got relatively weaker exchange rates. If you look at the full year in comparison, we had tea prices, you know, comparison to what tea prices were maybe 5 or 4 years ago. They seems to have maintained at about 3 shillings to 3.4 shillings a kilo. That compares to about 2.3 shillings in 2008, 2009. So overall, the commodity world prices have improved and maintained at what is comparably a better level. But when you analyze the results, the key factor, particularly for Williamson tea, was finance costs, and they've reversed from finance income of 30 million shillings last year to a finance cost of 51 million. That probably is what attributes to the drop in the 3.3%. When you look at Kapchorua, the main change is in the valuation of biological assets. They had a significant gain last year, which has fallen off this year, and which is probably the bigger contributor to the drop in profitability.
Now, Williamson Tea sold their investment in Williamson House, and that was said to boost earnings per share by 11 shillings 77. Is this a good thing that they've been selling assets, or do we need to start raising a red flag? Because is it a good thing that they are selling their investments and, as I say, not investing further, or is this a positive for them as they resize and perhaps restructure where their earnings come from?
Well, I think they seem to be concentrating on their core assets, which is tea production. They had a real estate investment, which effectively they sold off and paid off the dividend in a special dividend to shareholders. So, I mean, what they're selling is not their key assets. So they're looking at what assets they have that are not necessary for their day-to-day production and saying, well, can we sell some of these? So I don't think it's going to affect their profitability. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think there is probably opportunity for them. If you look at the net asset value of the company, it's still at a significant premium to the current price. So it's probably room for them to look at their non-core assets and probably sell them off and probably give the shareholders the benefit of asset revaluation over the years. I
mean, but when is that disconnect going to close? Because as you say, trading at a huge premium to where the share price is right now. We know Williamson's got a PE of 2.87 and Kapchorua is sitting pretty much in line with that. That's a very low PE. I mean, what's the investment case for these tea companies right now, and how would you compare them to other tea stocks or agricultural stocks that are listed?
I think in comparison with other tea stocks, they are fairly well valued. But I think the problem is more of an overall sectoral problem. The problem is that many analysts find tea factories very difficult to value, principally because you are dealing with 3 factors which are very hard to predict, which is the world tea prices, the weather, and the exchange rate. And on top of that, you've got the question mark about the valuation of biological assets. And because of that, the prices have remained depressed because people have perhaps said it's not really very easy to predict what these companies will do from one year to the other, and that has tended to depress. I don't expect that to close very soon. I think we will continue to see that disparity. But I think the key shareholders or the main shareholders seem to be happy with what they're getting so far.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. That was Paul Mwai, CEO of AIB Capital.